Modern Horizons previews are as expected. They are insane. There is some absolutely ridiculous power level creeps going on here, some of which I'm excited for, some of which I'm a little bit more concerned about, but that's Modern Horizons for you, right? So grab a cup of tea or a fizzy soda pop and sit down as we go through all the previews up until now. I'll cover the rest tomorrow and some more next week too. If you want to pre-order any of the cards mentioned in this video or any sealed product, you can do so from coolstuffinc.com and use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it helps to support the show. Link in the description below. Let's start off strong with Kozilek the Broken Reality, a 9-mana 9/9 Eldrazi. When you cast this spell, up to 2 target players may manifest 2 cards from their hands. For each card manifested this way, you draw a card, and other colourless creatures you control get +3/+2. So this has quite a low floor of being a 9-mana 9/9 if you were empty-handed and everyone else at the table is empty-handed. But in the situation of playing 1v1 in Modern, you can make yourself a 9/9, put 2 things from your hand down, face down as 2/2s, and then those 2/2s get +3/+2, which means you're making 15 power, and what's that, 13 toughness. That's a pretty reasonable threat and body, and when you do so, you draw a card for each card manifested this way, so if you just target yourself, you get to draw 2 cards as well, thus replacing the cards in your hand. And if the manifested creatures aren't gone, and you may turn them anytime face up for their mana value if they are creatures, so you're not just like wasting the cards in your hand. And if you've had 9 mana to cast Kozilek, you can probably turn up whatever else you're playing. It's quite strong, but I don't think it's any stronger than the previous versions of Kozilek that we've seen, so I don't think this will see much Modern or Legacy play. Meanwhile, in Commander, it's got some cool political abilities to give another player at the table some advantage by helping them manifest 2 cards from the hand face down as creatures too. So there is this thing where you can talk to your table and get some advantage out of it that way. It also allows you to draw 4 cards if the other player does manifest 2 cards. On top of all of that, we've got to bear in mind that it's not just giving manifests +3/+2, it's giving all other colourless creatures you control +3/+2, which includes artifact creatures and Eldrazi that you might already have in play. So yeah, its buff is quite big for Eldrazi type decks in Commander. Overall, it's big, it's splashing, it's exciting, but I don't think it's going to be that good. Its pre-order prices are insane. I wouldn't buy it at its pre-order price right now. On the flip side, Ulamog the Defiler kind of is insane, although it's less insane than its previous versions. I'll come to that. Ulamog the Defiler is a 10 mana 7/7, and when you cast it, an target opponent exiles half their library rounded up. It has a ward cost of sack 2 permanents, which is pretty big, and Ulamog the Defiler enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counters equal to the greatest mana value, or CMC if you're a boomer, among cards in exile currently, and then it has Annihilator X, where X is the number of counters on it. Straight up, this card is incredibly powerful and very, very scary, mainly because you can get like Annihilator 7 onto this reasonably easily. A key point to make is that it doesn't just care about your opponent's exile from its own trigger, so it enables its own ability later on by exiling half the library, but it also cares about your own things in exile. So if you put a 7 CMC creature underneath the new Solan from Modern Horizons 3 earlier in your game of Modern or Commander, then you've got a set +7/+7 on your Ulamog. It's a 14/14 with Annihilator 7, the biggest Annihilator we've ever seen. All of that said, whilst I think this card is very, very scary, I don't think it's as scary as the classic Ulamog 2.0. The reason Ulamog 2.0 sees so much play in Legacy, Modern, and Cube is that when you cast it, you get to exile 2 permanents. Exiling 2 permanents is the best part of the card, because even if it gets counterspelled or somehow exiled upon enter the battlefield of a Solitude or Path to Exile Swords of Plowshares, you're still removing 2 of the lock pieces or threats or combo enablers or whatever it is your opponent is doing. Meanwhile, the Defiler actually doesn't have any indestructibility to it, so it can be killed with conventional kill spells, although they would have to sack 2 permanents to do so. But sacking 2 permanents is very, very different to having your best 2 permanents blown up. Ulamog the Defiler is scary, but it's just not as strong as the Ceaseless Hunger, and thus I think, again, this is more of a Commander card, which is funny, because Annihilator X, where X could be something like 7 or 9 or 10, doesn't feel very friendly to your casual games of Commander. This is coming from someone who enjoys Annihilator for what it is, this incredibly scary and brutal mechanic. That's just not very good for your average Commander table, because scary and brutal is not what we tend to aim for. Ultimately, the Eldrazi Titans are living up to their names, and I'm quite impressed with all 3 designs for being quirky and weird and interesting. I just don't think they're necessarily more powerful than any of the other previous versions, other than perhaps Emrakul in the correct deck. Argent Dais is a 2 mana white artifact which has some Phyrexian theming and flavour. It enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Whenever 2 or more creatures attack, you get to put an oil counter on it as well. 2 mana tap, remove 2 oil counters from it, exile another target non-land permanent, its controller draws 2 cards. So this has got a few interesting points to it. 1, whenever 2 or more creatures attack, full stop. So it actually cares about your opponents doing the same. So if they're attacking you in a 1v1 scenario, or in Commander, if people just make attacks all over the place, you will rack up oil counters on this pretty quickly. The third clause feels like good old-fashioned classic Magic, where you can exile anything, your own things and opponents' things, and thus you can exile your own unimportant tokens, for example, to draw 2 cards, or you can exile problematic permanents, or you can exile a small thing to give someone 2 cards in Commander. It is a great political tool that is powered up and enables everyone at the table. There's no restrictions making it worse than it should be, like we'd see in a normal standard set, because the power level can be pushed in Horizons. It's a very cool card. I don't think it's going to be a competitive staple, but I think it's a strong political tool. Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor, a 3-mana 3/4 Fox Advisor, legendary creature. It has lifelink. Enchantment spells you cast have affinity for auras. Whenever you cast an aura spell that targets a modified permanent you control, draw a card. Pearl Ear is apparently one of the lead protagonists of the original current card block that never got a card. This makes your expensive auras cost less for the number of auras you have in play, which is very strong, probably again for Commander more so than Modern, although this could open up a whole new archetype where you're trying to play Eldrazi Conscriptions after you've, layered up your Boggles or similar. Importantly, Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor herself, I believe she herself does not have any sort of protection from removal spells, so paying 3 mana for your enabler for it only to get solituded, plowed, or palved is not good. But that third line is also pretty exciting. Whenever you cast an aura spell that targets a modified permanent you control, draw a card. It basically makes all of your auras cantrip as long as they're targeting something that's already auraed up. So it's a bit of a core Spirit Dancer, but with a high investment up front and a few more hoops to jump through. Don't forget, if you put an aura onto a creature that has a counter on it, for example, that also counts as being modified. So it doesn't just benefit being suited up with auras, but that's kind of where it's going. Interesting card, but again, I'm not sure it's going to replace core Spirit Dancer. I guess in a deck that's looking to combo by drawing most of the deck, the second mode, or third mode, should I say, past the lifelink and the affinity kind of helps with that. If there are more colorless auras that could be reduced down to 0 cost off the first ability, other than say Eldrazi Conscription, that would be pretty good. Funnily enough, Eldrazi Conscription appears to be the only colorless aura in the entire game currently, so it's really funny that the only way to turn this into a free cantrip is to play the 8 mana Eldrazi Conscription after you've already played 8 auras. I don't think the Cheerios deck is quite there with this. Then we come to the flares. We get to see the rest of the cycle. Flare of Fortitude is a 4-mana white instant. You may sack a non-token white creature rather than pay its cost. Until end of turn, life totals can't change, and permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. This is a reactive and protective spell, which kind of makes sense in the white part of the colour pie. It's better than seeing another Plowshares variant or similar, or a crap aura, as we saw with the first free spell cycle from the original Modern Horizons. I am scared of these, very much so. This one doesn't seem like it should be broken. I guess the place it easily fits into in the current landscape is probably Hammer Time in Modern, perhaps. Death and Tax could play this in a pinch to not die to combo decks. But on top of that, it could be part of a combo deck. If your life total can't change and opponents you control gain hexproof indestructible, it has a bit of an Angel's Grace feel to it, but you can still lose the game if your life total was to become 0, although it can't change when this is resolved. It's quite a complicated card to figure out exactly where you could put it. So I'm predicting it being a sideboard protection spell for decks like Hammer, or maybe allows you to just stay alive whilst you combo kill people. The important part about the life total not being able to change, though, is that you can't pay life. I even checked this with judges on my Discord, which means you can't crack fetches while this is active, and you can't pay life for, off of Ad Nauseam, for example. But then I've just looked at Ad Nauseam, and Ad Nauseam is not a life payment, of course. It feels that way, but it's not. It's just life loss. So I think, Flare into Ad Naus allows you just to get the cards without losing life. So again, that's where I'm thinking. Some sort of Ad Nauseam deck, could be in Modern, could be in CDH, playing Flare as a free spell after sacking some incidental white creature. That's the big hold-up, right? The Ad Naus decks don't want to play random white creatures to get this for free. Meanwhile, Flare of Malice is a 4-mana black instant that can be played for free if you sack a non-token black creature. Each opponent sacrifice a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. This one seems quite good, mainly because black having non-token creatures around to be able to be sacked is pretty easy. You might have a spare Bowmaster off your 2 bodies that you made. Bearing in mind you can't use a Bowmaster token, you have to use the original Bowmaster, but more importantly, you might have a spare Grief after you've evoked it, or creatures that you really want to put in the bin anyway, like Bloodghasts, or what the hell? The 1-mana one that mills 2, then dies and mills 2. Why can I not remember what that's called? But I play it in a lot of decks. Dredge played it for years. And thus, this edict that kills the highest mana value thing around by just getting rid of a body that you probably want to put in the bin anyway, seems like the closest to just easily fitting into existing decks. That said, I can't pick out a deck in Modern that probably wants to play this outside of perhaps Dredge, and even Dredge probably doesn't utilise this very well. And thus, this is probably part of a new archetype that the format might grow to have, thanks to the cards from Modern Horizons 3. Something the Modern Horizons set should aim to do is open up and widen formats, instead of just, improving existing decks. This is the one I'm watching out for being the best of the cycle. However, the red one is fucking weird. Like, not quite as weird as the white one, but more weird in an obvious way. It is a fork that, again, is free if you sack a non-token red creature rather than pay its mana cost. And then it copies a target instant or sorcery spell, not even the one that you've got, so you can copy your opponent's stuff. So again, this could be a weird piece of sideboard tech for hitting people's end-game kill spells, indomitable creativities and similar things like that. Although that said, the opponent still gets their copies, so it's pretty bad into creativity. Scratch that. But ultimately, this is the kind of card that will end up being part of some sort of weird Storm deck in a format somewhere, especially considering this set is bringing another Storm Powerer, the Storm Enabler to Modern, which I'll come to a bit later. So this card probably is the most fundamentally broken of them. Maybe this or the white one in terms of what you can do with it at the absolute sheer end of it, but it's finding the right deck for it. Of course, you want spare bodies around to be able to sack to do this, and again, that's a problem, right? The Storm decks of old do not want to be sacking their Electromancers to power out a Flare of Duplication to do some stormy Storm stuff. In theory, having to sack a body is a real cost that I think makes these cards not as easily slotting into existing decks and every deck as the previous free spell cycle from Modern Horizons 2. Dog Umbra is a cute bit of design, a 2-mana flash, enchant, creature, aura, and as long as another player controls enchanted creature, it cannot attack or block. Otherwise, Dog Umbra has Umbra armor. So it is a pacifism on the opponent's creature, but if it's on yours, it's a flash Umbra armor, which means that if the creature would be destroyed, instead you remove the Umbra instead, so it can save your creature in combat. It's a combat trick in the limited environment, but it's also a pacifism. I said the limited environment. This is so reasonably versatile. You could see it seeing a little bit of play in Commander, but it's not going to see any play in, say, Legacy or Modern. Thraben Charm is a 2-mana instant speed spell with 3 modes. One is to deal damage to twice the number of creatures you control to target creature. It also destroys an enchantment and exiles any number of target players' graveyards. Incredibly versatile, perhaps fringe playable in your 60-card formats in a certain situation where you might need a very situational and bad removal spell in the first part, but an enchantment destruction spell and a graveyard exiling spell in the second and third part. I think this is kind of good, but I don't think I'd be happy to sleeve it up in any decks that I've played, because I'd rather have this on a creature body that I can get back with pre-war formal gear, or sort of Light and Shadow and similar, or flicker it with Ephemerate. Basically, creature bodies that do modes like this, like Dawnbringer Cleric and similar, are much, much more versatile for the way the decks that I play use them. However, this is still very versatile and has 3 relatively valid modes. I guess the problem is that where it's not a creature and you're not playing in your creature decks, if you're playing in a control deck, the first mode probably does fuck all anyway, and thus you're down to a 2-mode charm, which probably puts it in the unplayable camp. We come to my favourite card of the entire set, White Orchid Phantom. White for a 2/2 Spirit Knight, and it's referencing Knight of the White Orchid with its name. It's a Spirit Knight, has flying and first strike like your classic old White Knights of old, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target non-basic land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Essentially, it does a Ghost Quarter style effect, although Ghost Quarter can hit basics, and I kind of wish this could too. Shame, really. But ultimately, the reason I love this card so much is that I love Ghost Quarter. I love using Ghost Quarter alongside Aven Mind Sensors and Leon Arbiters and Death and Taxes in Modern. This probably becomes one of my first picks for a Modern D&T card from the set, and it combos with Leon Arbiter. So I'm going to absolutely be slamming this on day 1 to try and get people with my 12 different versions of Ghost Quarter in my deck that stops people searching. There is an element of just acknowledging the power creep of a flying first striking 2/2 for 2 mana, on top of the fact that it has a really reasonable and decent enter the battlefield effect as well. The other places could see play outside of playing the derpy Death and Tax decks that I like is Boom Bust, where you target your own indestructible land, one of the dual land artifact lands from the last Modern Horizons. You have to keep your land and go get a land as well, so it actually ramps you. You can also hit Flagstones of Trocare to go get 2 lands off of it, again, ramping you. So Red, White, Boom Bust, or D&T, I'm going to try and play both. This is sick. Only thing that makes it not a 10 out of 10 design for me is that I wish it was Ghost of the White Orchid to just give a little bit of a reference to Ghost Quarter. White Orchid Phantom is a little bit too loose and nefarious, nebulous is the word I'm looking for, to not be the direct homage to one of my favorite lands of all time. Wrath of the Skies is a white X. You get X energy. Then you may pay any amount of energy. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. So you can, for 1 mana, kill all 1/1s and 1 CMCs, 2 mana, 2, and so on and so on and so on. You can also just pay 5 or 6 mana into it, make 5 or 6 energy, then only pay 2 to wrath the things you need to do. This card seems incredibly good. It doesn't hit planeswalkers, so it will leave your planeswalkers alive when you cast it for 3, X equals 3, and you pay 3 energy into your Teferi Time Ravelers, for example, in certain formats. And on top of that, you can keep your Monetary Mentor around, for example, by just only paying 2 energy into it to kill everything smaller, and thus keeping your threat around. A versatile Wrath that hits all 3 creature types is kind of insane. Low-key, probably too good. In some ways, it reminds me of Prismatic Ending, where giving even white an answer like this that is so good and strong against so many different permanent types is a negative for me, because it makes the answers too good and it makes certain cards less playable. Cards like Aetherval, for example. I'm sad when a card ruins Aetherval's day, because I think Aetherval deserves to be played more. I assume this will be a pseudo-staple in Modern and Legacy, especially if an energy deck comes out of the format. Brain Surge is Brainstorm for 2 extra mana with an extra card drawn. Draw 4, put 2 cards back at instant speed. It seems like a solid 3 mana cantripping enchantment. I say cantripping, it gets you 2 extra cards actually, so it's card advantage, which is relevant. Of course, they decided not to do that 2 mana because that would have been absolutely fucking insane and broken. Is 3 mana then unplayable? Is that how fine a margin it is from having a strictly better Brainstorm? The 2 mana being too good, 3 mana being too bad? Or is actually 3 mana still playable? I'm not 100% sure, if I'm honest. I'm stopping and laughing because imagine if this was 3 mana and it's just 3 Brainstorms and a trench coat. Imagine if it was like draw 9, put fucking, what was that, 3 times 2, 8 back. Draw 9, put 6 back, right? That's how that would work. That would be kind of nuts. But it's not that. It's just a thought I had. Is this playable? I don't think so. I think this will see a little bit of commander play here and there. And drawing 4 card triggers, a lot of card draw triggers on random things like Locust Gods and such. But, yeah, I'm not too hot for outside of Commander. Oh, baby. Non-basic lands are islands. Full stop. It's Megas the Moon shifted into blue. But on top of all of that, not only is it Megas the Moon shifted into blue, there's 2 distinct differences they've made here. One, the creature types are arguably more relevant. I mean, human is good, and humans has been a deck in multiple formats, but Merfolk is also really good. Merfolk being a deck that having access to its own version of fucking Megas of the Moon seems pretty strong. Although Merfolk does play normally quite a number of non-basics, like Mutavaults and similar, so turning their own utility pieces into islands is a downside. The other side of it, the flip side of it, is that it's double blue in the casting cost, which is interesting. In some ways, that's a concession to the fact that Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon being castable off of a Chromox and a Soul Land has been a linchpin of decks in Legacy, and they perhaps didn't want to create mono-blue prison decks in Legacy that play Harbinger of the Seas. That said, I'm definitely going to try and play this in both Merfolk and some sort of blue prison shell in Legacy. I've played blue prison shells that play Echoraeons and similar things in the past, so I am all for trying to slam my own version of Megas the Moon in blue. The downside of Legacy, I guess, is that the islands thing is that islands are good, and a lot of blue decks like having islands, and thus, it's not as good as turning, I don't know, turning a trop into a mountain is a lot better than turning a trop into an island. So again, interesting shit. I fucking love it. I'm glad to finally see another card in that cycle. I guess it'll just take us another 25 years or whatever before we get the white, green, or black one. Emperor of Bones is a 2 mana skeleton noble. It's a 2/2. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. And then for 2 mana, you can adapt 2, which puts 2 counters onto the creature. Then it says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put onto Emperor of Bones, put a creature card exiled with Emperor of Bones onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So in essence, it is a creature that never needs to go to combat in order to trigger its ability, because it's just at the beginning of the combat step. You get to put a creature from your bin into its exile zone. Now for 2 mana, you adapt it, which is the same cost as it costs to play, so you're doing this on turn 3, and then you put that creature that's currently in your bin into play. Now it does have a finality count on it, it does gain haste, and then you sacrifice at the end step, so it's not a permanent reanimation spell, but it's still quite strong. In some ways, Emperor of Bones is a weird sneak attack that costs less mana to activate. It's 4 mana to get it into play and put the counters on it, and no further mana, you just have to do it sort of like half and half in. This reminds me more of Sneak Attack than it does I don't know, animate dead. Now, importantly, at the beginning of combat on your turn, exile one creature, and then you can respond, not to say respond, after you resolve that, you can then adapt before going to declare attacks, and you will be able to get the creature on turn 2, or the turn you play this on, if you've got 4 mana available, to be able to slam a jam. So really, all you're looking to do is put one thing in the bin, with absolutely no requirement for what it is. So you can put fucking Eldrazi, you can put a track, so you can put anything in the bin off of a 1 mana cantrip that does so. Of course, Faithless Looting is still banned in Modern, and then you can get it into play off Emperor Bones. This seems very, very strong. You've got to also bear in mind that it can also put more things under it, but up to, so you don't have to put things under it. Each turn that you go to combat, you can put more things under it if you want to. And then any other way you put a counter on this, via, I'm kind of blanking, Gaffney Township is one that I always go to, but it's just not good enough. But anything that just puts one counter on this, even a 1 mana spell that puts a counter on it. I did a quick search. That could be anything from, your Arbor Armament is the first one that I found on Scryfall for 1 mana. Or more recently, Lost Jit can also just be a thing that can repeatedly put counters onto this creature. And you can just proliferate it once you've adapted it too, because putting a counter on it will trigger it. So it's a recurable, reusable thing once you jump through a few more hoops. This has to be good somewhere. Like, I want to try brewing and playing with this in both Modern and Legacy, which is what I'm going to say about a lot of the cards in this set. It's very exciting for new decks. Then we have Marionette Apprentice, a 2 mana 1/2 that has Fabricate Wands. When it enters the battlefield, it either gets a counter or makes a 1/1 colorless servo. And whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. That's right, this is one part of Marionette Master, I think the card is called. That's it, Marionette Master, which is a card that I've included in many a commander deck in the past, just to be a 6 mana, it's just a kill spell. Because even when its power is 1 and you're sacking bodies to it, you can sacrifice so many bodies to it to just, not to it, but to a sack outlet to kill opponents. Marionette Apprentice, being at 2 mana, makes it a much better deal in terms of getting to have the engine online. It is reminiscent of Disciple of the Vault, a card that had been banned in Standard before. It's not quite Blood Artist, but it's not far off. I think this is one of the best Blood Artist cards we've seen in a very long time, mainly because it cares about both card types, and thus can fit into all numbers of strategies like Aristocrats and different commander decks, or even, at this mana cost, a Modern deck. Warren Soul Trader is a sack outlet that can play into it. And that's an interesting point as well. There's going to be a load of suites of cards that are like the connective tissue for a draft archetype within the format, and then when you grab them all and put them into the same deck, you may end up with something that might be marginally playable in another 60-card constructed format like Modern. In this case, Warren Soul Trader is a 3 mana 3/3 zombie goblin wizard, 2 very valid creature types and 1 reasonable one, and it has pay 1 life, sack another creature, create a treasure token. So this is like a Skirk Prospector, but you have to pay a life each time, and it can't sack itself, and it doesn't only care about goblins, it can sack anything to make treasures. Importantly, sacking a body to make a treasure, for example with the card we just looked at, the Marionette Apprentice, that's 1 damage. You sack a treasure, that's 2 damage. This thing is fucking nuts. This is going straight in my Wanker Banker EDH deck, and I think there will be a deck or an Aristocrats deck you can build around this, where you just sack a load of bodies together to create an engine of sacking things and pinging people. This plus Mirkwood Bats is 2 damage every single time. This plus the Marionette Apprentice plus a Mirkwood Bats is 4 damage every time you do it. It's an easy engine to assemble. Big fan of this card. Techless Phoenix sounds like they just forgot to change the placeholder name for it. It's a 3 mana 2/2 that has Bestow, so you can play it as an enchantment onto a creature, and in order to do that you pay 1 red mana and collect Evidence 6, a mechanic from Murders at Karl of Mana. Flying, haste, enchant creatures +2/+2, flying and haste, which is the normal Bestow thing. Normally the creature gives its power and toughness plus its keyword abilities to the creature it's attaching to, and you may cast a Techless Phoenix from your graveyard using its Bestow cost, meaning that it could be an enabler, an engine from the graveyard for something that self-mills, like some sort of dredge deck. Although we've seen these kind of effects a million times before, I doubt it will be that playable, but it's a cool collection of text, I guess. Bestow with evidence attached to it and a graveyard thing. It's fine. I don't know, at Rare, I'm unimpressed with it, but then if it ends up seeing play in Dredge, then I'll be more impressed with it. Mog Mob is 3 Mog Fanatics in a trench coat, continuing the trend. We had Llanowar Elves in the first Modern Horizons, then we had the Healer's Hawks in the second one. Now we have Mog Mob, which is a 3 mana 3/3 that can sack itself, deal 3 damage, divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 targets. It's pretty good. I can't wait till we get, I don't know, what could the black one be? 3 1 mana black creatures. 3 Disciples in a trench coat? I don't know. There's a lot of options there. Power Balance, a callback to Counterbalance, a 2-mana red enchantment. When an opponent casts a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you do, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the 2 spells have the same mana value. Now, historically, Counterbalance plus Sensitive Running Top was a lock piece in multiple formats across the years, resulting in Top being banned in Legacy, mainly because the deck took too fucking long to do anything. Meanwhile, Power Balance goes the other way in terms of enabling you instead of disabling your opponent, and thus, in something like Legacy, where people are playing 1 and 2 mana spells, you can get a lot of free shit off Power Balance, especially if you can brainstorm things at the top in response to the trigger, let the trigger resolve, and then get the card you need off the whatever your opponent's playing. This card has to be good somewhere. I'm almost certain of it, especially if you can do any top deck library manipulation. Maybe Power Balance could see play in a Lantern Control shell in Modern. Of course, when you put it alongside Sensitive Running Top, you do get Power Top as a joke for something that I will let you Google if you want to. But ultimately, that's not going to happen in Modern Legacy because Top is banned in both. But you can play them both in Commander. Oh, Modern Horizons. I don't think it's Commander Horizons, but I think a lot of the cards are going to be good there. Wheel of Potential, 3 mana, sorcery. You get 3 energy, and then you may pay X energy. Each player may exile their hand and draw X cards. Where X is 7 or more, you may play the cards exile this way until the end of your next turn. So it's a wheel that draws X equal to the energy that you put into it. Each player may do so players can ignore this wheel in multiplayer or in 1v160 card, to be honest. And then if it's over 7, you get to get access to your old hand until the next turn anyway, setting you up for a massive combo turn with a very powerful draw 7. Draw 7s historically have been the wheelhouse, if you will, if you excuse the pun, for combo decks that are looking to just draw a whole new 7 and pop off with some sort of big mana enabler or similar. The fact that you can get access to your old hand whilst also doing this seems good, but of course you need 7 energy to do so, and it really depends upon if the energy setup is there. There are a hell of a lot of fucking energy cards in this set, and honestly, it's kind of overwhelming to look at them all and just try and see a deck built. I will absolutely love to try and play with one when it comes out, though. The jury is out. I just don't know whether energy is going to be viable or become a viable thing in 60-card format. Eldamri Kovekadal, I think I might not have butchered that name, is a 3-mana, 3/3 legendary creature elf warrior. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You play creature cards from the top of your library anytime. There's 2 lines of text that we see time and time again, probably every other set at this point, especially for creatures. It's a future sight for creatures. But most importantly, green, tap it, tap 2 untapped creatures you control, not elves, just creatures. Reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, you may put it into the battlefield, activate only during your turn. So you can just randomly reveal shit from your hand on top of your library that isn't a creature for a laugh, but if it is a creature, you put it onto the battlefield. It's like a variant of an Elvish Piper that seems incredibly strong, especially when looking at the top card of your library too. So you can use Congregation at Dawn to stack the top of your library, for example. Yeah, this seems pretty fucking pushed for a 3-mana elf warrior, giving you access to both card advantage and the ability to play creatures just out of fucking nowhere. Very, very strong commander that actually is so powerful that I could see it seeing a small amount of play in elves decks in Modern or Legacy too. Probably not Legacy. I don't think it's that important, but it allows you to play your Crater Hoof for cheap, for example. Now, Elves in Modern is about to get a lot better because Wirewood Symbiote is also coming to the format, which I think I'd missed out of my summary today as an old card being printed in. So I'm quite excited to play new Elves in Modern with access to all the tech and weird shit that we've seen in previous Legacy versions of the deck. Speaking of Elves, here's an Elf Shaman Mutant with Adapt 2 for 2 mana. It's a 3-mana 2/1, and whenever one or more counters gets put onto Evolution's Witness, return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. It's a play on the old Eternal Witness. Of course, as you proliferate this and put counters on it and other means, you get to trigger it and do it again. I think this card is going to be absolutely fucking nuts in some commander decks, but I don't think it's too hot for constructed play. I think maybe this has a home in Cube too. I imagine this card being very fun in Cube. 6 is the tree that Ren and 6 was attached to, but this is it prior to the attachment. A 3-mana 2/4, has reach. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them into your hand of the cards milled. And as long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace, which is something we've never seen before. Retrace was always on instants and sorceries, even with the emblem from Ren and 6. So you may cast permanent cards from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying some of the costs. So essentially the mill doesn't hurt you that badly because you can still play your creatures, your planeswalkers, your artifacts, your enchantments and similar from the bin by pitching a card to the bin. Yeah, this card seems very strong. A good value engine 2/4 creature with reach. Is that constructed playable outside of your 100 card fuck around formats? Maybe. Genuinely, maybe. I could see this in some sort of Slowgo aggro loam, because you can fucking retrace your loams once you accidentally mill them with this or life from the loam. Yeah, I know, I think this card is legitimately good. Trickster Elk is a 3-mana 3/3 bestow enchantment that is a 3/3 elk, but when it goes onto a creature, they also become a 3/3 elk. And when that creature dies, it falls off and becomes a 3/3 in play on your side of the board. This card is for limited, but I really like the fact that it references that Rowan saying to Will, wait, is that one our dad? Referencing where Oko turned their dad into an elk. Rest in peace, King Kangmith. Honor Kennerud, Sky Captain, is a 5-mana 4/4 flying life-linking ward discard a card. That's right, this is the kind of legendaries you get in 2024. It's a human knight, and whenever a modified creature you control attacks, double the number of each kind of counter on it. Then for each non-token permanent attached to it, create tokens that copy that permanent attached to that creature. Fuck, what the fuck is this? Okay, so in essence, this is a commander plant in the main set, absolutely. I don't see this seeing huge amounts of constructed play. It also seems like a limited bomb as well. But ultimately, this thing can make you duplicate swords of X and Y. If you attack with a Batterskull, you get a second copy of Batterskull attached to the germ. It also copies auras, which is another obvious thing that can be attached to them. So this thing is a payoff for both auras and equipment and just go into combat with modified creatures and counters. Seems very, very strong, and I guess it's a cool space to be in for Esper. You don't really see this thing in Esper anymore, or at all, really. It feels like a new space. But yeah, making multiple swords of fire and ice, that sounds kind of hot. I might build that. The Necrobloom is a card that people on my Discord thought should be banned immediately, and I still don't understand why. They seem to be overhyping it a little bit. It is 4 mana, it is Abzan, it is a plant, it's a 2/7, which is already a fun stat line. It has landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant for a creature token. So far, so things we've seen before. And if you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. So far, so many things we've seen before on one of the most broken lands ever printed with Field of the Dead. And then land cards you control, sorry, not you control, but land cards in your graveyard have dredge too, which means that any land in your bin, whether it be a fetch land, whether it be a cycling land, would that be a fucking pitch, discard channel land from Kamigawa, you can put them back in your hand by dredging too. So it both does the thing, enables the thing, and then just enables you to do all sorts of wild shit. There must be some really fucking fun things we can do with this, but both in like aggro loam shell style builds or aristocrat loam shell builds in certain formats, as well as just being a very strong commander. I'm not saying this card isn't just a fucking stacked 4-mana 2/7 with a million abilities. What I am saying is that I don't think it's broken. I just think it's just a power-crept pile of nonsense. And to be honest, that can be a describer for pretty much every card in this set, especially the fucking legendaries. And then we come to a really interesting cycle of uncommons and commons, with Witch Enchanter being a 4-mana, 2/2, ETB, blow up an artifact when charming opponent controls. But if you flip it over, it's a land. And I was expecting this to be a land that, so there's MDFC, by the way, not that it transforms into it, but you can pick which way it comes down when you play it. It's a modal spell. It's either a land or the creature on the other side. And I was expecting this to be a tap land on the other side, like we saw with a lot of the very strong modal spells, the NDFCs, from Zendikar, when we went back to Zendikar. However, the backside of the uncommon singular colour ones are actually the bolt land style, so they enter the battlefield tapped unless you pay 3 life. Now, some of you might be asking, is this actually really that good? Because the flip side is just a plains that isn't a plains that you have to pay 3 life to get in untapped. And the other side is a 4-mana overcosted 2/2 Reclamation Sage. What I'm going to tell you is, yes, this is fucking great. The point being that any card that has multiple modes gets a lot better value. And the fact that the flip side of it can still be untapped to allow you to enact your game plan on curve is very strong. So essentially, you just get this extra spell in your 60-card deck without having to remove one of your actual gas, 26 or 27 cards in your main deck. Sorry, 37 or 30. Numbers are not my strong point, as you can tell. It's 33 to 37, right, depending on what deck you're playing. So now one of your lands can also, in a pinch, do something really, truly unique. Like be a body that carries a sword, that blocks, and also blows up a thing. This card is very, very good. To the point that I think D&T might play this in Legacy or Modern, especially as the front side of it is a creature that can be flickered with Ephemerate, Restoration Angel, or Flicker Wisp, or brought back with pre-war formal gear or Sword of Light and Shadow to just get more value. Bear in mind, if you Flicker Wisp it when it's flipped over into a land, because the front side is Witch Enchanter, it comes back as the creature. So you can even play as a land early, Flicker Wisp it, and get the body later if you need to blow up a Leyline's Binding, for example. The next one in this cycle is the green one, the Disciple of Freyalise, which is making an allusion to Disciple of Bolas, which was a rare, by the way. This is a triple green and 3, so a 6-mana 3/3 that when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature you control. If you do, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So you get life and card draw off of killing one of your own big things. It's like a momentous fall or similar. But on the flip side, we've got an untapped green source. Now, I think this card is worse than the white one. 6 mana is a huge investment, but at the same time, being able to sack off 5/5 to gain 5 life and draw 5 cards can be very, very strong. I'm a big fan of just level a bolus in Commander. I think this card is actually fucking nuts for Commander, and most of my green decks are now going to play it because it's kind of there's almost no downside to actually playing it. Will it see constructed play? I don't think so. Maybe you could play as a one-of an Amulet Titan, but the point you're sacking like a Titan to draw 6 cards and gain 6 life, I don't really know why you'd be doing that, because you're probably losing the game if you're sacking your Titan. At time of recording, we haven't seen the other colours. So let's move on to the Planeswalkers. Tamiyo Inquisitive Student seems fucking nuts. 1 mana, 0/3, flying. When it attacks, investigates, you get a clue, you get card advantage to crack later for 2 mana to draw a card. And whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile Tamiyo, then return to the battlefield, transform under your owner's control. So it absolutely easily enables the ability to flip her, but more importantly, if you just cast the card Brainstorm, you can flip her immediately. Now that sounds fucking wild, right? But her flip side is relatively low in power level. Her +2 is until next turn, whenever a creature attacks, you or Planeswalker you control get -1, -0 until end of turn, which is Jace Architect of Thought, like half of it. And then -3 is return target creature, instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's green, add a mana to your mana pool, which is truly unique. All of these have a clause where if a card is a certain color, it powers it up. And then -7, draw cards equal to half the number of cards in your library rounded up, and you get an emblem with no maximum hand size. So in essence, it will flip over and do nothing but debuff the opposing team, but then on the next turn, you can then get back a Brainstorm at an absolute minimum, or tick up again, and you're then on 6 loyalty. In essence, getting towards 7 isn't that difficult. This feels like a Protect the Queen style card. I think it's nuts because it's so easy to flip, but the back end just seems reasonably unimpactful. Although in Legacy is where I'm thinking here because of the Brainstorm synergy, I think protecting this and then getting to that 7 to just draw your whole library, and I don't think it's that hard, but again, are you even winning at that point when someone could then combo kill you? I guess you have access to all the permission in the world when half a deck is in your hands. It's a weird one, because flipping it is not difficult even in the slightest, but once you flip it, you aren't necessarily just like that far out. Well, you have a Planeswalker active, the opponent's got to kill it. It's pretty fucking hard to swing into, really, when it goes up to 4 loyalty and debases all the power and toughness of the creature on the other side of the board on turn 1. Actually, no, flipping on turn 1 and just ticking up, that seems good. I think this card will see some play in Legacy, surely. Sorin of House Markov is a 2 mana life linking 1/4 with Extort, which means you can pay extra mana when you cast spells to extort your opponent for 1 life, and they lose it, you gain it. Beginning of your post-combat main phase, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, exile Sorin the Markov, Sorin of House Markov, and then return to the battlefield, transform under your owner's control. And here he is looking like a villain from Yu-Gi-Oh! When he comes back, he looks less like a villain from Yu-Gi-Oh! And more like he's had a really fucking bad night out on the town. Sorin, Ravenous Neonate, says he has Extort still. He upticks by 2 to create food. He -1s to deal damage equal to the amount of life you gained this turn to any target, and -6 getting control of target creature if it's a vampire and additional other types, and put a lifelink count on it if you control a white permanent other than the creature or Sorin. Okay, so this is a bit harder to flip, but it's not that hard. 3 life is pretty easy, especially considering that just requires you to crack 1 singular food that you can get off of pretty much fucking anything in the current game of Magic. So Sorin, again, is reasonably easy to flip. And its flip side is a little bit more impressive than Tamiyo, I guess. I guess the ultimate is less imposing for just how much it's going to fuck the game up. Like, stealing 1 creature will not win you the game on the spot, but he also just ticks up every turn to create food, pads your life total out, seems good into aggro, and his -1 is good if you are just passively gaining life generally, especially if you're extorting spells and stuff. I don't know. Again, they're weird because they're so easy to flip. So even though the backsides of them aren't that good, just being able to get that so early in a game of Magic might be good enough. Ral Monsoon Mage is a 2 mana 1/3 instance and sorcery spells you cost 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell on your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it does 1 damage to you. If you win the flip, you may exile Ral. You don't have to. If you do, return him to the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control. So the front end is a weird Baral. To the point that I don't even know if Baral will see any play anymore, because you might want a Baral that you can choose to flip. I guess the downside is that if you lose all your flips, it just fucking kills you, which seems bad. When he flips... So really, actually, it pinging you might make it a legitimate downside to Baral, but Yeah, that's pretty bad if being aggroed. His flip side is whenever he enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on him for each instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn. So if you storm it off before him, he enters with all the counters. His +1 is until the next turn. Instant sorcery spells you cost 1 less to cast, so you get back part of the front end for the +1. His -2 is deal 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral. So his -2 is an electrolyze that only draws you a card if you have a blue permanent. And his -8 is exile top 8 cards of your library. You may cast instant sorcery spells from among them this turn without paying the mana costs. And I think, weirdly, this might be the best of the flip of the last three we've looked at. It's harder to flip, I guess. You got to win a coin flip, quite literally. So it is a bit more random. But if you have a storm turn where you really cast multiple spells and then get multiple triggers and then flip him, you actually get to go fucking wild because you could flip him over after casting 6 spells, -8, and just fucking win the game on the spot. That said, you have to pay this gambling thing of every time you cast a spell, you get a trigger, and when you could either just get pinged, or if you don't flip him after the first one, then he won't enter the battlefield with the counters from all the spells cast. Or I guess you put all the spells on the stack at the instant speed, trigger him multiple times, and he will still flip over and get all of the counters from the spells previously cast. This card is fucking nuts for like how complicated it can be, and I can't wait to force Storm in a cube and try and play him. I also will be trying to play him in Modern and Legacy Storm decks. This card is fucking sweet. I'm so excited for Around the Monsoon Mage. Grist, Voracious Lava is a 1-mana 1/2 of Death Touch. When the lava or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it entered from the graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay a green mana. If you do, you get to exile this and flip it. So in essence, you've got to play her from the graveyard with a Finale of Devastation, or retracing her off of 6, for example, is another option in the set. Grist the Plague Swarm is a 3 loyalty planeswalker with no passive ability. +1, you create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, then mill 2 cards. Put a Death Touch counter on the token if a black card was milled this way. -2 to destroy an artifact or enchantment, so it's got like a naturalize effect strapped to it and is immediately accessible even on the initial flip. And then -6 for each creature card in your graveyard to create a token that's a copy except as a 1/1 black and green insect. Its ultimate has the chances to just be a fucking nuts. I guess the ultimate is kind of has the potential to be some sort of like oops all spells, Angel of Glory's Rise, powerful fucking loop thing in a self-milling dredge style combo deck. That said, getting to -6 is going to be pretty hard when all it does is make 1/1s all the time. It protects itself, which is an important part of being a planeswalker. It's a 1/2 Death Toucher on the front side, which is pretty good. This seems pretty solid, but it's the least exciting. Is it the least exciting? It's got more hoops to jump through, both to get it to flip and to get to the ultimate. So yeah, I'm not so hot on Grist. And then there's a whole cycle of MDFC lands that are tapped on the backside but make 2 colors of mana, and the front end do things. Now these absolutely vary wildly, so I'm going to go through each one. The Blood-Soaked Insight is the red-black one at 7 mana. Costs 1 less for each 1 life loss your opponents have suffered this turn. Target opponent exiles top 3 cards of their library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. If you cast a spell this way, mana of any type can be spent on it. So you get to steal 3 cards from the library temporarily, and it can cost as low as 2 mana. And thus, I think this is perhaps playable in Commander and nowhere else. Drowning of Truth is a 7 mana Eldrazi Devoid. Whenever you cast this spell, if colorless is spent to cast it, you get 2/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn tokens. An absolutely okay front end, considering casting 7 mana creatures will trigger Kozilek's Unbinding, which I've done a whole fucking video on how broken that card is. So I think the front end is actually playable, perhaps in one of the Eldrazi or Tron style decks, even in Constructed, potentially. Just because it gives you another 7-drop somewhere in your deck, and also just a tapped mana source if you need it. Although it might just be that that's just a little bit not quite good enough to really get you there. And I guess it's playable in Eldrazi Commander decks, I don't fucking know. Glasswing Grace, a 5 mana enchant creature, gets +2/+2, has a lifelink and flying, so it's a Gift of the Orzhov, is the reference with the Glasswings. Flip side's a black-white land. I doubt I would ever play this in any format other than limited. I don't think this is Commander playable either. Legion Leadership is a 2 mana until end of turn, double target creature's power, and it gains first strike. So it's not quite double strike as I first read it. However, making a creature really fucking big in the front end means it combos with double strike enablers, and on the back end it's a tap land. This is probably my favourite pick for just being a random card in Commander that will just randomly murder people out of nowhere if you have access to it in your hand in the late game. So it's good in the early as a tap land, It's good in the late as a fuck you card. I think this is very playable in Commander specifically. Revitalizing Repast is a 1 mana, put a +1 counter on target creature, it can destruct from turn to turn. So this is probably part of our weird sneak attack reanimator Champion of Bone deck. There's also a green-black land on the other side. This is probably it's so cheap and at instant speed, this is probably playable. Gauge is destructible too. This is incredibly Commander playable, and maybe Constructor playable with the card we talked about earlier. Rush of Inspirations is the red-blue one. Draw 2 cards and discard a card at random unless you pay 2 energy. Yeah, it's instant speed, and you can just pay the energy to just draw 2 cards instant speed for 3 mana, which seems pretty solid. If there's an energy deck, this may well be good enough because you might have an abundance of energy just to keep the card draw. If there's no energy deck, this card is terrible. Strength of the Harvest, 3 mana enchant creature, +1/+1 for each creature and or enchantment you control. So it's a pseudo, it's not all that glitters, but it's all that glitters for enchantments and creatures, which makes it pretty solid. Again, very Commander playable in your Sithis and other Enchantress decks. Is it Constructor playable? No. Well, if it was common, it would be definitely be pauper playable, but I'm going to say no. Stomp, 2 mana, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. I mean, this effect exists a million times and just isn't good enough for constructors like Modern or Legacy, but we've never had this version of a card have a fucking tap land on the back of it, so never say never, but I don't think it's playable. If it was instant speed, I'd be a lot hotter on it. Suppression Ray, 5 mana, sorcery, tap all creature target player controls. You pay X energy and choose up to X target tapped creatures and put a stun count on them. Fine. This is a fucking big blowout, because in Limited I'm going to lose this a lot. I don't know if I play this in Commander. I guess, again, it being a land on the other side is just such a huge boon to it, because it's never fucking dead. But at 5 mana and sorcery speed, I mean, instant speed would be fucking insane too, but at sorcery speed, I'm probably never playing. This one, 4 mana instant, search your library for an instant or card with flash, fill it and put it into your hand, not alter your library. So this is Mystical Teachings, a redo of it. But on the back side of it, it's got a land. This card is great. This card is so good. I'm going to play this in many a deck. I know a 4 mana tutor is slow, but it's still just a fucking reasonable tutor that can just be a land. I can't reiterate how good I think it is when you can just play him as a land. So good. Kirik, Son of Yawgmoth, everyone's favourite Storm commander, I guess. As a kid down my local store who fucking loves this Kirik CDH deck, and he always wants to play against, like, our shit, like, upgraded precons. I'm like, no. Fuck no. Anyway, it's coming to Modern. I don't think it'll make a deck, but you never know. Ophiomancer, again, not good enough for Modern, but I do fucking love this card, making a 1/1 black snake creature token every turn, so you can sack it off to sack effects, like the Aristocrats deck I hinted at earlier with the treasure production of the Goblin. I guess you could sack one every single turn, and it triggers in every upkeep, including your opponents. You get a snake every turn, but you don't get a snake unless you don't have snakes. You have to kill the original snake first. It's a cool card. Cursed Mirror is a mana rock, and as it enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of a creature on the battlefield end of turn, except it has haste. Yeah, this card is legit. It's a mana rock that can do all sorts of weird and crazy shit, especially in Legacy, where it already exists. But I'm a big fan of this card. Again, there's no Modern home for it right now, but maybe, just maybe with all the Affinity shit, there is going to be one. Ruby Medallion and all the other medallions are entering, and I think it's going to be the red or the black one, right? Maybe the blue one. They end up seeing some splash and some play by facilitating some sort of new version of Storm. Ruby Medallion for 2 mana makes all red spells cost 1 less, which means Desperate Ritual is 1 mana make 3. It turns it into Dark Ritual. And you've got at least Desperate Ritual and the other one, Pyretic Ritual. So at least 2 versions of Dark Ritual off the back of Ruby Medallion. So I think this card, I'm assuming it will see some strong play. Also, all of these are like fucking $10. Or $15, some of them. So I think that's quite a solid reprint as well. Although I don't know how good Modern Horizons will be at bringing that price down. And lastly, I just want to point out that they're bringing all of the Threshold lands to Modern. Barbarian Ring is an absolutely playable card in Legacy Burn, so you can see it seeing play in Modern Burn too, especially the budget Mono Red version. Meanwhile, Simply Colosseum is playable in Dredge in Legacy, being a land that makes blue. It does damage you. But then when you've got Threshold online, you can sack it, target player draws 3 cards and discards 3 cards, so you can dredge 3 things and discard 3 dredges from your hand and just go fucking wild. This is absolutely a case of Dredge has a new toy, which I know is a meme, but here we are. And that brings me to the end of this fucking, I mean, once I've edited it, it's probably still going to be close to an hour long. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please don't forget to like, comment down below, and share it around as well. And if you enjoy the cut of my jib and the shit that I say, check out my Patreon as well. That's linked down below if you want to get involved with my Discord server and similar. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Pre-order your cards through CoolStuffInc.com, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.